Emma sat alone at the corner table of the upscale restaurant, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her water glass. The elegant chandelier cast a warm glow over the dining room, but she felt anything but comfortable. Her date, Marcus, had excused himself 20 minutes ago to take what he called an urgent business call, leaving her surrounded by couples enjoying their romantic evenings. She checked her phone for the third time, hoping for a text explanation but found nothing. The waiter approached with a sympathetic smile, refilling her water glass without being asked. Emma forced a smile in return, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She had spent hours getting ready for this date, carefully selecting her navy blue dress and styling her auburn hair just right. Marcus had seemed so charming when they met at her friend Sarah's birthday party 2 weeks ago. He was a successful marketing executive with an infectious laugh and confidence that drew people to him. When he asked her out, Emma felt like she was finally getting back on track after her difficult divorce 6 months earlier. The restaurant buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses, making her solitude even more apparent. She watched a couple at the next table sharing dessert, their eyes locked in intimate conversation. Her own divorce had left her questioning her worth, and sitting alone now brought back all those painful feelings of not being enough. Emma worked as a graphic designer for a small advertising agency, a job she loved, but that barely covered her modest apartment rent and student loans. She wasn't wealthy or particularly sophisticated, just a genuine person trying to rebuild her life. The restaurant Marcus had chosen was far more expensive than anywhere she would typically dine, but she had been touched that he wanted to take her somewhere special. As another 10 minutes passed, Emma began to accept the painful reality that Marcus wasn't coming back. Perhaps he had seen someone more attractive, or maybe he had simply lost interest during their brief conversation before his mysterious phone call. She had shared a story about her struggles with her art therapy sessions after the divorce, wondering now if she had revealed too much too soon. The waiter approached again, this time with a gentle expression of concern. Emma realized she needed to make a decision about whether to order dinner alone or leave entirely. Her pride told her to walk out with her head held high, but her empty stomach and the fact that she had already invested her evening made her hesitate. She glanced toward the restaurant's entrance, hoping against hope that Marcus would appear with a reasonable explanation and an apology. Instead, she noticed a distinguished man in an impeccably tailored suit observing her situation from across the room. He appeared to be dining alone as well, but unlike her, he seemed completely at ease with his solitude. Their eyes met briefly, and he offered a small, understanding nod before returning his attention to his meal. There was something about his presence that seemed both powerful and kind, though Emma quickly looked away, not wanting to appear desperate or attention-seeking. The reality of her situation settled over her like a heavy blanket. She was alone again, just as she had been during the long, lonely months following her divorce. The confidence she had been slowly rebuilding felt as fragile as glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. Emma reached for her purse, preparing to ask for the check for her single glass of water and make a quiet exit. The thought of calling Sarah and admitting that yet another potential relationship had failed before it even began felt overwhelming. Her friends meant well, but their constant encouragement to get back out there sometimes felt more like pressure than support. Emma wondered if she was destined to be alone, if her ex-husband had been right when he said she was too ordinary to hold anyone's interest for long. As she fumbled with her wallet, Emma tried to maintain her composure despite feeling utterly humiliated. The evening that had started with such promise was ending in familiar disappointment. She signaled the waiter, ready to pay for her water and escape to the safety of her small apartment, where she could process this latest rejection in private. The distinguished stranger continued his meal, occasionally glancing in her direction with what appeared to be genuine concern rather than pity. Emma couldn't help but notice his confident demeanor and the way the restaurant staff treated him with obvious respect. Everything about him suggested success and sophistication, making her feel even more out of place in her modest dress and carefully applied drugstore makeup. Little did Emma know that this moment of apparent defeat would soon transform into something she never could have imagined. The stranger across the room was about to change the course of her evening and potentially her entire life, though she remained focused only on her immediate desire to escape the humiliating situation with whatever dignity she could muster. Just as Emma was about to stand and leave, The distinguished stranger rose from his table and walked purposefully toward her. He moved with the kind of confidence that comes from years of commanding boardrooms and making decisions that affect thousands of people. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his dark eyes held a warmth that contradicted his obviously expensive appearance. "Excuse me," he said in a deep, cultured voice as he approached her table. "I couldn't help but notice you've been waiting alone for quite some time. I'm Alexander Stone, and I was wondering if you might allow me to join you for dinner." Emma looked up, startled by the unexpected intervention. Alexander Stone. The name sounded familiar, though she couldn't immediately place it. His presence was magnetic, and despite her embarrassment, she found herself drawn to his genuine concern rather than feeling patronized. "I appreciate the offer," Emma replied hesitantly, "but I'm actually waiting for someone." Even as she said the words, they felt hollow. Marcus had been gone for nearly 40 minutes now, and no amount of wishful thinking would bring him back. Alexander's expression softened with understanding. "I've been in business long enough to recognize when someone has been stood up," he said gently. "And I've seen enough of life to know that whoever left you sitting here alone is making the biggest mistake of his life." There was something in his tone that wasn't just polite conversation. Alexander spoke with the conviction of someone who had learned to recognize value where others might overlook it. He had built his fortune not just through inherited wealth, but by seeing potential in companies, ideas, and people that others dismissed too quickly. Emma felt her defenses beginning to lower despite herself. "I'm Emma," she said quietly, extending her hand. "And honestly, I'm not sure whether to be flattered or mortified that my situation is so obvious to strangers." "Be flattered," Alexander replied, taking her hand briefly. "Because it tells me you're genuine in a world where authenticity is increasingly rare. May I?" He gestured toward the chair across from her. After a moment's hesitation, Emma nodded. Alexander signaled the waiter with a subtle gesture that immediately brought the man hurrying over. It was clear that Alexander was someone of considerable importance in this establishment, though he wore his influence lightly. "We'll need a few minutes to look at the menu," Alexander told the waiter, who nodded eagerly and retreated. Alexander then turned his full attention back to Emma, making her feel like she was the only person in the crowded restaurant. "So tell me about yourself, Emma," he said, settling back in his chair. "What do you do when you're not being stood up by men who clearly don't appreciate what they have?" Despite her earlier embarrassment, Emma found herself smiling. There was something disarming about Alexander's direct approach and his ability to address the awkward situation without making it feel shameful. "I'm a graphic designer," she said. "I work for a small advertising agency downtown. Nothing too glamorous, but I love creating visual stories." Alexander's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "Creative work is some of the most important work there is," he said. "I've spent my career in finance and real estate development, but I've always admired people who can take an idea and make it visually compelling. That's a gift." As they talked, Emma learned that Alexander Stone was indeed the Alexander Stone, founder and CEO of Stone Enterprises, one of the city's most successful real estate development companies. She had seen his name in the business section of the newspaper, though she never would have imagined having dinner with someone of his stature. What surprised her most was how easy he was to talk to, despite their obviously different backgrounds. Alexander asked thoughtful questions about her work and listened to her answers with genuine attention. He didn't seem to be humoring her or passing time. He appeared genuinely interested in her perspective on design and creativity. "You know," Alexander said after they had ordered their meals, "I've been looking for someone to redesign the marketing materials for my new downtown development project. The corporate firm we usually use produces beautiful work, but it lacks soul. Would you be interested in hearing about it?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. A project with Stone Enterprises could transform her career, but she didn't want to assume this was anything more than polite conversation. "I'd be honored to hear about it," she said carefully, "though I should mention that my portfolio is probably quite different from what you're used to seeing." "Different is exactly what I'm looking for," Alexander replied. "I've seen enough polished, soulless marketing materials to last a lifetime. What I need is someone who can capture the human side of what we're building. Homes where families will create memories. Commercial spaces where small businesses will grow and thrive." As their conversation continued over an excellent dinner, Emma found herself forgetting entirely about Marcus and his inexplicable disappearance. Alexander had a way of making her feel valued and interesting, not as a charity case but as someone whose thoughts and opinions mattered. When Alexander excused himself to take a brief phone call, Emma sat back in wonder at how dramatically her evening had changed. What had started as a humiliating experience was turning into one of the most engaging conversations she'd had in months. She couldn't help but think about the irony of the situation. Marcus's abandonment had led to an opportunity she never could have imagined. When Alexander returned from his phone call, Emma noticed a slight change in his demeanor. His expression had hardened, and there was a new intensity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He sat down and reached for his wineglass, taking a moment to compose himself before speaking. "I apologize for that interruption," he said, though his tone suggested the call had been significant. Business has a way of intruding on even the most pleasant evenings. Emma sensed there was more to the story but didn't want to pry. However, Alexander seemed to read her curiosity and offered a slight smile. "Actually, that call was rather interesting timing. It seems your absent date has quite a reputation around town." "What do you mean?" Emma asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. Alexander leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a protective quality. "Marcus Reynolds has apparently made a habit of this behavior. The call was from a colleague whose daughter had a similar experience with him last month. He takes women to expensive restaurants, then disappears, claiming urgent business calls. Usually, he's spotted later the same evening with someone else." Emma felt a mix of relief and anger wash over her. Relief that his abandonment wasn't really about her inadequacies, and anger that someone could be so deliberately cruel. So this was all just a game to him? "It appears so," Alexander confirmed. "Some men seem to derive pleasure from making others feel small. It's a character flaw that usually stems from their own insecurities." He paused, studying Emma's face. "But his loss is definitely my gain. I can't remember the last time I've enjoyed dinner conversation this much." Emma found herself blushing at the compliment. Throughout the evening, Alexander had treated her with a respect and attention that felt genuine, rather than performative. He had asked about her art therapy work with genuine interest, listened to her stories about helping clients express their emotions through creativity, and shared his own challenges in building a business while maintaining his values. "Can I ask you something?" Emma said, feeling emboldened by the wine and Alexander's encouraging presence. "Why did you decide to approach me tonight? You could have just minded your own business." Alexander was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass thoughtfully. "I suppose because I've been where you were sitting," he said finally. "Not literally, but I know what it feels like to be dismissed or undervalued. Early in my career, I was told I was too idealistic, too focused on community impact rather than pure profit. Many doors were closed to me because I didn't fit the traditional mold," he continued. "When I saw you sitting there, clearly a thoughtful, genuine person being treated poorly, something in me couldn't just watch it happen. Perhaps it's because I believe strongly that how we treat people in vulnerable moments says everything about our character." Emma was struck by his honesty and the glimpse into his own struggles. She had assumed that someone of Alexander's obvious success had always commanded respect, but his willingness to share his vulnerabilities made him seem more human and approachable. "Besides," Alexander added with a slight grin, "I have a confession. I've been eating alone in restaurants for years, buried in business papers and phone calls. Tonight was the first time in recent memory that I've actually enjoyed the social aspect of dining out." As the evening progressed, they discovered unexpected connections. Emma's interest in urban planning and community development aligned perfectly with Alexander's vision for his real estate projects. She shared her ideas about creating spaces that fostered community interaction, while he described his frustration with developers who prioritized profit over livability. "Most of my competitors think I'm foolish for spending extra money on community, gardens, and artistic elements," Alexander said. "But I believe buildings should enhance people's lives, not just provide shelter." "That's exactly what good design should do," Emma agreed enthusiastically. "It should solve problems and create experiences that make people feel better about their daily lives." When the waiter brought the check, Alexander handled it smoothly, dismissing Emma's protests with a wave. "This has been a business dinner," he said with a smile. "I'm serious about wanting to discuss that project with you." As they prepared to leave, Alexander's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and showed Emma the screen. It was from Marcus. Sorry about tonight. Emergency came up. Rain check? Alexander deleted the message without responding and looked at Emma with an expression of satisfaction. You know what I think about men who make excuses instead of taking responsibility for their actions? What? Emma asked, curious about his perspective. I think he'll spend the rest of his life regretting that he lost someone as remarkable as you, Alexander said simply. But more importantly, I think his poor judgment opened a door to something much better for both of us. As they walked toward the restaurant's exit together, Emma felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since before her divorce. The evening that had begun with such disappointment was ending with new hope, both professionally and personally. Alexander had seen something in her that Marcus had missed entirely, and for the first time in months she felt truly valued for who she was rather than apologetic for who she wasn't. 3 days after their unexpected dinner, Emma found herself standing outside the impressive glass tower that housed Stone Enterprises. She clutched her portfolio nervously, still hardly believing that Alexander had meant his offer seriously. His assistant had called the morning after their dinner, scheduling a formal meeting to discuss the downtown development project. The lobby was a testament to sophisticated design, with warm wood accents softening the modern steel and glass architecture. Emma noticed the careful attention to detail. Artwork from local artists, comfortable seating areas that encouraged interaction, and natural lighting that made the space feel welcoming rather than intimidating. Alexander's assistant, Maria, greeted her warmly and escorted her to the executive floor. Mr. Stone is very excited about this meeting, Maria confided as they rode the elevator. He's been talking about fresh perspectives and authentic storytelling all morning. Emma's nervousness increased as they approached Alexander's office. Through the glass walls, she could see him on a phone call, his posture commanding yet relaxed. When he spotted her, his serious expression immediately brightened and he quickly concluded his conversation. Emma, welcome, he said, rising to greet her. His office was impressive but not ostentatious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Like the lobby, it reflected a careful balance between success and approachability. Thank you for this opportunity, Emma said, settling into one of the comfortable chairs across from his desk. I have to admit I'm still pinching myself that this is really happening. Alexander smiled. Before we look at your portfolio, I want to show you something. He led her to a large table where architectural plans and artist renderings were spread out. This is Harmony Commons, a mixed-use development that will include affordable housing, small business spaces, a community center, and a public park. Emma studied the plans with growing excitement. The project was ambitious but thoughtful, designed to create a genuine neighborhood rather than just another collection of buildings. This is amazing, she said. You can see how much consideration went into creating spaces where people will actually want to spend time. Exactly, Alexander replied. But our current marketing materials make it look like every other generic development. They focus on square footage and amenities without capturing the community aspect. That's where I hope you can help. Emma opened her portfolio, her hands steadying as she shifted into professional mode. She had spent the previous evening selecting pieces that demonstrated her ability to tell stories through visual design. Alexander examined each piece carefully, asking thoughtful questions about her creative process and the challenges each project had presented. This one particularly interests me, he said, pointing to a series of illustrations she had created for a local nonprofit. You've managed to convey hope and possibility while acknowledging real struggles. That's exactly the tone we need for Harmony Commons. As they discussed the project details, Emma's confidence grew. Alexander wasn't just being polite. He genuinely valued her input and seemed excited by her ideas. When she suggested creating a campaign that featured real community members rather than stock photography, his enthusiasm was evident. We could document the construction process, Emma proposed, showing how the space evolves and involving future residents in the storytelling. People connect with authentic narratives much more than polished advertising. Perfect, Alexander said. I knew you would understand what we're trying to achieve here. Their meeting was interrupted by a knock on the door. Marcus Reynolds entered without waiting for permission, his confident smile faltering when he saw Emma sitting across from Alexander's desk. Alexander, I was hoping we could discuss the Fletcher property acquisition. Marcus said, clearly flustered by Emma's presence. "I didn't realize you were in a meeting." Emma felt her face flush, but Alexander's response was smooth and controlled. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Emma, our new creative director for the Harmony Commons project." "Emma, this is Marcus Reynolds from Fletcher Development Group." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on any of them. Marcus had abandoned Emma at dinner only to find her 3 days later in a position of professional prominence with one of the city's most influential businessmen. "We've actually met," Marcus said awkwardly, extending his hand to Emma. "I owe you an apology for the other night. Something urgent came up with a client, and I had to leave suddenly." Emma shook his hand briefly, her professionalism intact despite her inner satisfaction. "These things happen," she said diplomatically, though her tone made it clear she wasn't buying his explanation. Alexander watched the exchange with obvious amusement. "Marcus, perhaps we can schedule our discussion for later. Emma and I have quite a bit more to cover regarding her project." After Marcus left, clearly uncomfortable and confused by the turn of events, Alexander turned back to Emma with a satisfied expression. "I believe that's what they call perfect timing," he said. "I can't believe he just walked in here," Emma said, shaking her head. "Of all the coincidences." "Not really a coincidence," Alexander replied. "Marcus has been trying to get a meeting with me for months. His company wants to partner on several projects, but I've been hesitant due to concerns about their business practices. After learning about his behavior toward you and others, I think my instincts were correct." Emma realized that her encounter with Marcus had provided Alexander with valuable insight into his character, information that would influence significant business decisions. Sometimes, she reflected, people reveal their true nature in the smallest interactions. "So," Alexander continued, returning his attention to the project materials, "when can you start? I'd like to fast-track this campaign so we can begin pre-sales within the next 2 months." Emma's heart raced as the reality of the opportunity sank in. This project could transform her career and provide financial security she had only dreamed of since her divorce. More importantly, she would be working on something meaningful, helping to create a community that would improve people's lives. "I can start immediately," she said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Though I should mention that I'll need to give my current employer 2 weeks' notice." "Of course," Alexander agreed. "We'll structure this as a consulting arrangement initially so you can transition gradually. And Emma," he added, his tone becoming more personal, "I want you to know that this offer is based entirely on your talent and vision. Our dinner the other night simply confirmed what your portfolio clearly demonstrates." As Emma left Alexander's office that afternoon, she felt a profound sense of transformation. The woman who had sat alone and humiliated in a restaurant just 3 days earlier was now embarking on the most exciting professional opportunity of her life. Marcus's cruel game had inadvertently led her to something far better than she could have imagined. 6 weeks into the Harmony Commons project, Emma's life had transformed beyond recognition. Her creative campaign was generating buzz throughout the city, with local media praising the authentic approach to community development marketing. More importantly, her professional relationship with Alexander had evolved into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. Emma had established a temporary office within Stone Enterprises, where she worked closely with Alexander's team to develop comprehensive marketing materials. Her innovative approach of featuring real community members and documenting the construction process had captured public attention in ways traditional advertising never could. "The pre-sales numbers are incredible," Alexander told her during one of their weekly progress meetings. "We're already at 60% capacity and we haven't even broken ground yet. Your campaign has people genuinely excited about being part of this community." Emma beamed with pride as she reviewed the latest analytics. Local newspapers had featured her work, and several other developers had reached out about potential collaborations. The financial security she had worried about for so long was becoming a reality. But more satisfying was the knowledge that her work was making a meaningful difference. Their professional collaboration had naturally extended into personal time together. Alexander had introduced Emma to the city's cultural scene, taking her to art gallery openings and theater performances. In return, Emma had shown him the community arts programs where she volunteered, giving him insight into the grassroots creativity that flourished in neighborhoods he had previously only known through demographic reports. "You've changed how I see this city," Alexander told her one evening as they walked through the downtown area where Harmony Commons would be built. "I used to look at these streets and see development opportunities. Now I see the stories in the people who give places their character." Emma had also noticed changes in Alexander. The driven businessman who had initially seemed so polished and controlled revealed a thoughtful, caring side that emerged when he felt truly comfortable with someone. He spoke passionately about his plans to establish a foundation supporting arts education, inspired partly by Emma's work with art therapy clients. Their friendship hadn't gone unnoticed by others in their social and professional circles. At a charity gala for the local arts council, Emma found herself the subject of curious whispers and speculative glances. Alexander Stone, who was known for his private nature and focus on business, was clearly enjoying the company of his creative director in ways that suggested more than professional collaboration. "People are talking about us," Emma mentioned to Alexander as they danced at the gala. "Your friend Mrs. Henderson has been watching us all evening with great interest." Alexander chuckled. "Margaret Henderson has been trying to set me up with her various daughters and nieces for years. I think she's fascinated by the fact that I finally seem interested in someone she didn't handpick." The comment hung in the air between them, acknowledging the growing personal connection they had both felt, but hadn't directly addressed. Emma's divorce had left her cautious about romantic relationships, while Alexander's dedication to his business had kept him focused on professional rather than personal fulfillment. "Alexander," Emma said carefully, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course," he replied, his attention fully focused on her. "When you offered me this project, was it purely professional, or was there something more behind it?" Emma's heart raced as she asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. Alexander was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "Initially, yes, it was about your talent and the fresh perspective you could bring to our marketing. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also drawn to your character and authenticity. However, I want you to know that your success on this project is entirely due to your abilities, not because of any personal feelings I might have developed." Emma felt a mixture of relief and excitement at his honesty. "I needed to know that," she said, "because I've been feeling conflicted about whether my professional success is legitimate or just the result of being in the right place at the right time." "Emma," Alexander said seriously, "you've revolutionized how we approach community development marketing. 3 other firms have already contacted us wanting to understand your methodology. Your work speaks for itself." As if summoned by their conversation about him, Marcus Reynolds appeared at the edge of the dance floor. He had been persistent in his attempts to secure business meetings with Alexander, apparently unaware that his reputation had preceded him. Emma watched as he approached with his characteristic overconfidence intact. "Alexander, Emma," Marcus said with a forced smile, "I was hoping I might steal a moment to discuss some mutual opportunities." Alexander's expression remained polite but cool. "Marcus, I believe my assistant has been clear that we're not pursuing partnerships with Fletcher Development at this time. I understand there may have been some misunderstandings," Marcus continued, his desperation becoming more apparent. "Perhaps we could clear the air over dinner sometime soon." Emma exchanged a glance with Alexander, both of them remembering their conversation about Marcus's pattern of behavior with women. The irony that he was now seeking their professional approval wasn't lost on either of them. "I appreciate your persistence," Alexander replied diplomatically, "but our development philosophy and business practices don't align. I'm sure you'll find other partners who are better suited to your approach." After Marcus retreated, clearly frustrated by the polite but firm rejection, Alexander turned back to Emma with a satisfied expression. "Sometimes the best business decisions are also the most personal ones," he said. "You mean choosing to work with people whose values align with yours?" Emma asked. "Exactly. And speaking of values," Alexander said, his tone becoming more serious, "I've been thinking about what you asked earlier. Would you be interested in having dinner tomorrow night? Not a business dinner, just the 2 of us exploring what this friendship might become." Emma's heart skipped as she realized that her life was about to change once again. The woman who had been abandoned at a restaurant 2 months earlier was now being courted by one of the city's most eligible bachelors, not because of what she might represent to his image, but because of who she genuinely was. 1 year later, Emma stood on the balcony of her new apartment overlooking Harmony Commons, watching families move into the community she had helped bring to life. The marketing campaign that had started as a professional opportunity had evolved into something far more meaningful, a genuine community where people from diverse backgrounds were creating the kind of neighborhood she had envisioned in her designs. Her relationship with Alexander had developed slowly and thoughtfully, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared goals. They had taken time to navigate the transition from professional collaboration to personal partnership, both aware of the importance of maintaining the integrity of their individual achievements. "The community garden is even more beautiful than I imagined," Alexander said, joining her on the balcony with 2 cups of coffee. "Mrs. Chen's vegetables are already the talk of the neighborhood." Emma smiled, remembering how nervous she had been about incorporating community input into the project design. The decision to include resident feedback had resulted in features she never would have considered, like the intergenerational playground and the small performance space where local musicians held impromptu concerts. "I got a call from the mayor's office yesterday," Emma shared. "They want to discuss implementing our community-focused marketing approach for the affordable housing initiative downtown." Alexander's pride in her success was evident. "You've started something important here. Other developers are finally realizing that authentic community engagement produces better results than traditional marketing." Emma's design consultancy had flourished beyond her wildest dreams. The success of Harmony Commons had led to projects throughout the region, and she had been able to hire 3 additional designers, including her former colleague from the small advertising agency, where she had once worried about making rent. Their personal relationship had also attracted attention from the local society pages, though both Emma and Alexander remained private about their romance. They were often photographed at charity events and cultural functions, but their genuine connection was evident to anyone who observed them together. "Emma," Alexander said, his tone shifting to something more serious, "I have something I want to discuss with you." She turned to face him, noting the nervous energy that reminded her of their first dinner together, when he had approached her table with careful consideration. "I've been thinking about the foundation we discussed," he continued, "the one focused on supporting arts education and community development. I want to move forward with it, but I want you to be my partner in running it." Emma's heart raced with excitement. They had talked extensively about using their combined resources and expertise to create lasting change, but she hadn't expected him to formalize the partnership so soon. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Running a foundation together would mean our personal and professional lives would be completely intertwined." Alexander reached for her hand. "Emma, what happened to you that night at the restaurant was awful, but it led us to each other. I've watched you transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone around you through your work. I can't imagine a better partner for building something meaningful." As if summoned by the mention of that pivotal evening, Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and showed Alexander the screen, both of them bursting into laughter. It was from Marcus Reynolds. "Hey Emma, I know it's been a while, but I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner sometime." "I promise no work calls this time. He still doesn't understand what he lost, does he?" Alexander said, shaking his head in amazement. "Some people never learn to recognize value," Emma replied, deleting the message without a second thought. "But I'm grateful for people like him because they make me appreciate people like you even more." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Emma opened it to find Sarah, her friend whose birthday party had led to the fateful introduction to Marcus, holding a bottle of champagne and grinning widely. "I hope you don't mind the impromptu visit," Sarah said, "but I had to see this place for myself." "Emma, it's absolutely gorgeous." As they showed Sarah around the apartment, Emma reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who had once sat alone and humiliated in a restaurant was now living in a beautiful home, running a successful business, and building a meaningful relationship with someone who valued her for exactly who she was. "You know," Sarah said as they sat in the living room, "I have to apologize for introducing you to Marcus in the first place. I had no idea what kind of person he really was." "Don't apologize," Emma replied quickly. "If you hadn't introduced me to Marcus, I never would have been at that restaurant the night I met Alexander." Sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best outcomes. Alexander raised his coffee cup in a toast to unexpected beginnings and the courage to see possibility in difficult moments. As they clinked their cups together, Emma thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. Marcus's abandonment had felt like confirmation of her deepest fears about her own worth. But it had actually been the catalyst for discovering her true value. Alexander hadn't rescued her that night. He had simply recognized what was already there and given her the opportunity to flourish. The evening sun cast a golden light over Harmony Commons, illuminating the community spaces where neighbors were gathering for their weekly potluck dinner. Emma watched children playing in the garden while their parents shared stories and laughter. Knowing that her work had helped create this sense of belonging, "He'll spend his whole life regretting that he lost you," Alexander said softly, echoing his words from that first evening. "But his loss gave us something beautiful." Emma leaned against him, feeling the deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. The humiliation of being abandoned had transformed into gratitude for being found by someone who understood her value. Sometimes she realized the worst moments of our lives are actually the first moments of something wonderful beginning.